There you have the scene at the Trade Center in Dallas where President Kennedy was going to make an address, and the crowd assembled waiting to hear the president, learning what had happened to him. If we can, we will try to clear up this arrest which has taken place in Dallas. The police department has arrested a man, but in connection with the shooting of a Dallas policeman, the fatal shooting of a Dallas policeman, the man was arrested in a theater in the Oak Cliff section of Dallas. He had a pistol at the time he was arrested, and the policeman he allegedly killed was killed by a pistol shot. There is nothing now to definitely link this man who has been taken into custody with the assassination of President Kennedy, who was killed by a bullet from a high-powered rifle. From all we can tell from reports from Robert McNeil at the hospital, from doctors who treated the president and were able to give specific and clinical details of the wound, indicating that it was a high-powered bullet, quite probably a large caliber bullet, too. We are now going to go to an NBC mobile unit, which is outside the NBC building here in New York, for pictures and sounds of the reaction of citizens of this city to the loss of their president. We go to NBC reporter Jeff Pond.
We're on the street outside the NBC studios in Rockefeller Center. Sir, how did you hear of the president's assassination?
Gentleman came into an office in which I was transacting business and mentioned it to us, and at the time I really wasn't able to believe it. I had to hear it myself, and unfortunately I did very shortly afterwards.
What is your feeling now?
I'm terribly shocked and saddened by it, and I would add angered by it.
Why angered?
I think it was a horrible, senseless thing, and I hope that the rest of the country feels the same way.
Do you think that this assassination somehow reflects a climate of opinion in the country now?
I hope that it doesn't reflect a climate of opinion that is very prevalent in the country today. It certainly, obviously reflects an opinion that some people hold. I hope that as an American and the other people as Americans do not generally hold this feeling.
You said some people. Who do you mean by that?
I don't feel expert enough to express an opinion, but the only evidence that I have as to who these people are these ultra-conservative groups that have been distributing literature and spreading hate in Texas, and who attacked Ambassador Stevenson was about a week ago.
A little longer than that. Of course, no one knows if these people are indeed responsible.
No, certainly not.
Thank you, sir. Ma'am, what was your reaction?
I was very shocked and saddened by the president's death. I was getting some eyeglasses fitted when I first heard about it, and then I was riding on the bus when they finally told me he was dead.
Do you find it difficult to believe even now?
I really do. I really find it difficult to believe now.
The president was in Dallas, which is, of course, part of the South. Do you think that somehow his racial policies are in any way connected with this?
That's the first thing I thought of when I heard about it, yes. I thought that probably some segregationist crackpot or something, just they had it all planned out, and I really believe that his blood will be on their hands forever, yes.
Thank you. How about you, sir? Do you believe it even now?
This is the first time in my life I honestly say I'm not proud to be an American. Right now I'm serving in the armed forces, and I'm just home on leave, and it's an understatement to say it was a shock. I at first did not believe it, and I have trouble believing it now. I just don't think it reflects the thinking of most people. As was stated before, I think it's a small minority, and it's just an unfortunate day for the United States that this can happen. It's just something that you read in history books and just never want to believe that can happen when you're living.
Do you think this in some way reflects on the security arrangements that the Secret Service?
There are random samplings, what I've called man-in-the-street interviews, people here in New York City, their reactions to the loss of the President of the United States, John F. Kennedy, who died approximately an hour and 45 minutes ago in Parkland Hospital in Dallas, Texas, after being fatally wounded by a sniper. Developments in the nation's capital reported now by NBC's David Brinkley in Washington.
Bill, we've reported this before, but we will report again that the president's body
is expected to arrive at Andrews Air Force Base, a few miles outside of Washington, at about 5:30 Washington time, which is about an hour and 40 minutes from now. The church bells all over town are ringing. We're told that people are standing on street corners, crying openly and freely. NBC's Robert Abernathy reports from Andrews Base that the base commander says the president's body, again, will be arriving at 5:30. He also says that Senator Edward Kennedy and his sister, Mrs. Shriver, who was Eunice Kennedy, have just taken off by jet for Otis Air Force Base in Massachusetts. We assume then they are going to their home state to join their mother, father, and other members of the Kennedy family. We also are told that military officers who have the job of arranging state funerals are at the White House now and presumably making the plans. Mr. Kennedy is the first president to die in office since the Defense Department was set up and these arrangements were made. And I think there is no set standard ritual to be followed, so to some extent it will have to be made up. Presumably the Army will be in charge of the arrangements, as it always has been, and it has, of course, caissons and ceremonial horses at Fort Myer, Virginia, which is nearby, along with honor guards of troops who presumably will be used. That is about all we have here at the moment. Richard Valeriani of NBC News is at the White House, as is our mobile unit with a live picture, so we'll switch there and see what's happening. Richard?
The American flag atop the White House here in Washington has been lowered to half-mast. It came down shortly afterward. There was confirmation of the president's death in Dallas. In the White House itself, the president's two children are still there, Caroline and John Jr. We do not know yet if they have been informed of their father's death. We don't know either if there are any of the cabinet members here right now. The two ranking members of the presidential staff were Ted Sorensen and McGeorge Bundy, two of the president's aides. The picture of the flag flying at half-mast, as seen through the trees stripped of their leaves, captures the mood of grimness here at the White House. Outside in front of the White House, crowds have begun to gather, waiting for, they probably don't know quite what, perhaps looking for some visual confirmation of what they and everybody else find so hard to believe, that the president is indeed dead, the victim of an assassin's bullet in Dallas. Police have roped off one side of Pennsylvania Avenue. They are allowing pedestrians to walk in front of the White House, but not to congregate there. Extra police details have been sent and have to contain the crowds outside the White House and to surround the White House on all sides. Traffic is moving normally, and there are no other changes. We are also told that an assistant to Vice President Lyndon Johnson has also arrived at the White House, Mr. George Reedy. There is not a great deal of hard information coming from the White House press office. The first word that was received there was from a reporter who was asking for permission to enter. First word of the fact that the president was shot. The mood in there, too, is one of just utter shock, utter disbelief. The White House press office is jammed with reporters waiting for some bits of information, waiting for any kind of word on what is going to happen next. To repeat, most of the news from here is being received from Dallas. There is no late information on what the next developments will be. The crowds are still gathering outside the front of the White House, across Pennsylvania Avenue. The weather in Washington is gray, rather unseasonably warm, slight chill in the air. People here, as people must be all over the country, walking around with looks of stunned disbelief on their faces. This is Richard Valeriani, NBC News, at the White House in Washington.
Here in Washington, Senator Goldwater of Arizona, Barry Goldwater, who who was the man regarded as most likely to oppose President Kennedy in an effort to take the presidency away from him in the election next year, has issued a statement which he says it is most shocking and dreadful that a thing like this could happen in a free country. The president's death, Senator Goldwater said, is a profound loss to the nation and to the free world. He and I were personal friends. It is also a great loss to me. Mrs. Goldwater and I offer our heartfelt sympathy to Mrs. Kennedy and to the president's family. He's canceled the political appearance he was going to make last night in Grand Rapids, going to make tomorrow night in Grand Rapids. He reflects really the feeling that is prevalent here on both sides of the aisle in Congress. A feeling of great personal bereavement, a feeling of loss, a feeling of shock. I think back to the night of the convention in 1960, when Vice President Lyndon Johnson accepted the nomination. Governor John Connally was then the floor manager for Lyndon Johnson. He was the man who was always his closest assistant in all of his political campaigns. That is Governor Connally of Texas, who now lies wounded in a hospital in Dallas. About 2 o'clock in the morning, when there was much talk that Lyndon Johnson would be offered the vice presidential nomination, John Connally told me that he was positive he would never accept it. I had talked earlier to the late speaker, to Sam Rayburn. He told me, too, that Lyndon Johnson would never accept the vice presidency, would never give up the job of Senate Majority Leader to take it. And I bet John Connally then $50 that Lyndon Johnson would take the vice presidential nomination. And at 2 o'clock that morning, John Connally made that bet with me, really positive that his very close friend, Lyndon Johnson, would not accept it. This, I suppose, is the way that history is made. Had Lyndon Johnson not accepted it, he, of course, would not be President of the United States today. No one could ever have believed or dreamed that a president so young would not conclude his term of office, that death would interrupt. There is very little else to report here in Washington, just the general reactions from... Oh, and a bulletin has just come in from Dallas. A sniper armed with a high-powered rifle murdered President Kennedy today, according to the Associated Press Dispatch. Oh, here, barely 2 hours after Kennedy's death, Lyndon Johnson has taken the oath of office as the 37th President of the United States. So it is President Lyndon Baines Johnson, 55 years old, the new President of the United States. Now, back to New York.
There are details on the swearing in of Lyndon B. Johnson as President of the United States. The oath was administered in Dallas at 1:38 Central Standard Time. That would be roughly an hour and 20 minutes ago, by a federal district judge, Sarah T. Hughes. President Johnson took the oath aboard the presidential plane.